Introduction. A territory of more than 660,000 square miles was sold for $7.2 million. Before that moment, Alaska had belonged to the Tsar for more than a century. The fort's Orthodox churches and trade stations of Russian America were distributed along the Pacific coast. The Alaska Purchase ended all Russian activity in North America and left behind many structures still visible today. From the southern coasts to the Aleutian Islands, traces of the Russian period still exist in urban layouts, in old cemeteries, and in the settlements that were once left behind. Echoes from the Tsar Empire. On Sitka Bay, the green dome of St. Michael's Church appears among the old wooden streets. Around the harbour, a few buildings still retain the 19th century structure of the period when Sitka was called New Archangel, the administrative center of Russian America. In the late 18th century, the Russians built forts, warehouses, residential areas, and offices of the Russian American Company right along this coast. From Sitka, beaver pelt trains traveled along the Pacific coast, bringing back the profits that determined the survival of the colony. By the mid-19th century, economic activity was weakening. Beaver pelts were in short supply, operating costs were rising, and defending the remote territory became difficult after the Crimean War. In this context, the Russian government began to view Alaska as a strategic burden. In 1867, after negotiations with the United States, an agreement was signed to sell Alaska for $7.2 million. On October 18th, a handover ceremony took place at Castle Hill. Russian and American troops assembled on the hillside. The Russian flag was lowered and the American flag was raised, marking the change of sovereignty for the entire territory. From that moment, Sitka ceased to be a colonial capital. On Castle Hill, only the foundations of old buildings remained set between the forest and the sea. Kingdom of the Giants won. Denali, the Great One. Denali rises from the heart of central Alaska, 310 feet above sea level. The surrounding Alaska range stretches for nearly 400 miles, with slopes covered in ice year-round. Temperatures at this elevation can drop below -40 degrees Fahrenheit. The air is thin, the winds are strong, and the weather changes in minutes. The hiking trails are only open for a few short months each year. Below the mountain are the Toklat and Savage valleys, where herds of elk move through the tundra. Dall sheep cling to the rocky slopes, and brown bears forage along the riverbanks. Large glaciers flow from the south slopes, joining together to form the massive Kahiltna ice system, which is more than 25 miles long. To the Koyukon Athabaskan people, Denali means the Great One. They used that name centuries before the first explorers saw its summit. Denali's peak is only visible during short, unpredictable weather conditions. Most of the time, clouds cover the area, making the mountain invisible, even from a distance of only a few dozen miles. Katmai, Kingdom of the Brown Bear. Summer in Katmai comes slowly and goes quickly. As the ice melts on Naknek Lake salmon, streams begin their journey upstream. They travel hundreds of kilometers from the Pacific Ocean to the same rivers where they were born. At the same time, brown bears emerge from their dens after months of hibernation. They are thin, shaggy, and slow. But just a few weeks later, Brooks Falls became the epicenter of a cycle of survival that continued for hundreds of miles. From mid-June, the first salmon runs appeared. By late July, more than 1 million had swum through the rivers, lakes and streams to spawn, then died shortly afterward. This abundant fish became a regular feast that fed the entire ecosystem, birds, foxes, wolves, and especially brown bears. At Brooks Falls, dozens of bears congregated along the water, each picked a spot, keeping its distance according to its natural order. Adults occupied the upper reaches, cubs or mothers, and cubs stayed in the lower reaches. Although they shared the same food source, each individual hunted differently standing midstream, waiting at the foot of the falls, or retrieving fish that had fallen behind after a failed crossing. In the middle of salmon season, bears ate almost non-stop. They gained weight, rapidly storing fat for the long winter ahead. As the fish stocks dwindled, each bear left the river, moving toward the volcanic hills to find shelter. In the snow caves, they enter a state of hibernation that lasts for months. In these deep caves, their cubs are born. When the ice melts in the spring, their mother bears led them out, beginning their first journey across the tundra. World of Frozen. When glare meets the sea, 1. Kenai Fjords and Exit Glacier. Kenai Fjords is one of Alaska's most dramatic glacial regions, where mountains, ice, and sea meet in the same space. Dozens of large and small glaciers pour into the fjords, cutting through the Pacific Ocean and creating a landscape that changes with the seasons. The deep blue color of the melting ice, the echoing, cracking sound of ice blocks collapsing into the fjords, and the year-round snow-capped peaks make up the typical landscape of the southern Alaskan coast. The centerpiece of the park is the Harding Icefield, an ancient ice mass left over from the last ice age, tens of thousands of years old. This icefield covers more than 150 square miles, is hundreds or even thousands of feet thick, and feeds more than 40 glaciers that flow into the sea. This forms fjords such as Iñupiat and Northwestern, where one can see the melting and rebuilding process taking place each year. Exit Glacier is the only glacier that is easily accessible by road. The trail to the base of the glacier passes year markers 1951, 1978, and 2005 that mark the location of the ice head at each stage. Each marker recedes further into the valley, showing the rate of retreat over the past few decades. From the end, the ice surface appears blue-gray and has deep crevasses, with meltwater flowing into small streams into Resurrection Bay. The coastal Kenai fjords are one of the most biodiverse ecosystems in Alaska. Seal sea otters, humpback whales, and bald eagles congregate around the fjords in the summer. As the ice collapses into the water, the echoes travel between the cliffs, blending with the waves and birds, creating a unique soundscape. Off the Harding Icefield, illuminating the entire mountain range in a blue-white hue. From the height of the icefield, glaciers curve along the mountainside and slowly flow out to sea. 2. Prince William Sound. Prince William Sound stretches nearly 6,000 square miles, a giant bay surrounded by the ice-covered Chugach Mountains. More than 100 large and small glaciers spill down to the sea. Interspersed with rocky islands and fjords that create a network of natural channels that crisscross the area. Columbia Glacier is a glacier known for its rapid retreat. For more than 4 decades, the ice cap has retreated dozens of miles, with new icebergs breaking off daily and drifting into the bay. Their sizes vary from tiny pieces of ice to blocks the size of a building. The impact echoes along the cliffs and dissipates into the cold air. On the calm water, groups of seals rest on flat patches of ice. Otters emerge near the shores of small islands, while bald eagles glide along the cliffs looking for fish near the river mouth. The light changes with the hours of the day. Misty mornings, turquoise sunlight at noon, and a golden glow on the drifting ice in the late afternoon. When the wind dies down, the bay is as flat as glass, reflecting the mountain's forests and ice in a distinct symmetry. This is the beauty of this bay. 3. Bald eagle, survivor of the Alaskan sky. Along the cold bays of Alaska, bald eagles are the most frequently seen birds. Their wingspan of more than 7 feet allows them to soar over the damp pine trees for hours without flapping their wings. Their dark brown plumage with white heads and tails makes them stand out against the gray coastal sky. Eagle populations declined dramatically in the 20th century due to the use of DDT, a pesticide that causes eggshells to become thinner and more fragile. Alaska was one of the few places where they maintained a stable population. When DDT was banned and conservation programs were implemented, the population gradually recovered. Today, tens of thousands of individuals live along the coasts of bays and rocky islands, more than in any other U.S. state. Bald eagles live in pairs. Each pair maintains a large coastal territory, often including mudflats, estuaries, and natural lookouts on cliffs. They return to the same nests for years, adding more branches each season until the nests become enormous and weigh hundreds of pounds. During salmon season, eagles often monitor estuaries and shallow waters. They dive at high speeds, touching the water for a moment with their talons and then pulling up. If the fish is too large, the eagles use their feet to hold the catch and paddle on the surface of the water to create enough force to fly. Hunting efficiency is not always high, but seasonal fish stocks help keep the pair energized throughout the summer. 4. Glacier Bay. Leaving the southern coast of Alaska, the coastline stretches east to Glacier Bay, an area deep in the Fairweather Range and recognized by UNESCO for its exceptional geological value. 200 years ago, the entire bay was covered with ice nearly a mile thick. Today, the ice has retreated nearly 60 miles, leaving behind a system of islands, bays, and new lands that are slowly being regreened. Of the 16 remaining glaciers, Marjorie and Johns Hopkins are the two most powerful. Icefalls occur here regularly. When a large piece breaks away from the wall, the sound echoes far and wide, the water ripples, and the newly fallen ice drifts slowly into the quieter bay. On the newly thawed land, moss and lichens cover the rocky surface. Over the decades, shrubs and young spruce grow, creating a young forest between the older rocks. On clear mornings, the Fairweather Peak is reflected in the flat water. The cold air from the newly fallen icebergs mixes with the sea mist, creating a hazy layer hanging between the mountains and the bay. 5. Inside Passage south of Glacier Bay, the Alaskan coastline splits into hundreds of narrow channels and channels that stretch for more than 600 miles all the way to the Canadian border. This route is called the Inside Passage, where temperate rainforest, snowy mountains, and the ocean meet in a natural corridor. Along the route, ships move between snow-capped cliffs and moist forest slopes. Rain falls most days of the year, but it is this moisture that keeps the forest alive, causing moss, lichen, and ferns to cling to the tree trunks, hanging down in thick layers like a natural curtain. Between the high cliffs, small waterfalls cascade directly into the sea, slicing the landscape into thin strips. On the shore are small coastal communities living off the tides and the fishing season. In Haines, the old wooden wharf is still in use from the 19th century. Ketchikan, a town deep in the rainforest, was once the center of the Southeast's lumber and fishing industry. Brightly painted wooden houses built on stilts along the water's edge are reflected in the flat ocean at high tide. In some forested areas, Tlingit totem poles are still preserved, engraved with the symbols and histories of each clan. In the summer, the light lasts almost all day. Morning fog covers the channel. By midday, weak light filters through the clouds, creating patches of light on the ocean's surface. As the tide rises, the water changes hourly, reshaping the bay's shoreline. Six, Juno and Mendenhall, Glacier. Traveling along the Inside Passage, the journey ends in Juno, a city isolated between mountains, forests, and sea. The city is completely surrounded by the coast mountains and the Gastineau Canal, with no road connection to the mainland. All transportation depends on the port and airport, making Juneau one of the most isolated cities in North America. The downtown core is on a narrow strip of land close to the bay. Small streets wind around the foot of the mountain between brightly painted 19th-century wooden buildings. At high tide, light reflects off the water and illuminates the storefronts and seaside neighborhoods. Behind the city, the Tongass temperate rainforest covers the mountainside, connecting to the snow and ice higher up. On days with light rain, low clouds obscure the entire edge of the city. When the sky is clear, waterfalls are visible along the cliffs. About 8 miles from the center, the Mendenhall Glacier extends from the Juneau icefield and slithers down into the valley. The ice surface is deeply cracked, and the light that filters through is a deep blue. Meltwater from the ice cap flows into Lake Mendenhall, where Nugget Falls cascades down the side of the mountain. On the trail leading to the observation area, year markers mark the ice cap's location, showing the dramatic changes over the past century, each a retreat in the ice. A milestone in time. Looking south from the lakeshore, the city shrinks between the forest, the mountains, and the sea, two spaces a few miles apart that together make up the landscape of coastal Alaska. Part 4. Call of the Wild, the North Journey 1, Skagway and the Klondike Gold Rush. When news of gold in the Klondike spread in 1897, Skagway quickly became the largest gathering point for groups heading into interior Alaska. Within months, the small harbor was receiving boatloads of people from Seattle, San Francisco, and many coastal cities. They brought with them digging tools, tents, winter clothing, and more than a ton of supplies needed to survive the icy conditions. Tents lined the mud roads, while warehouses, taverns, and stores were built to accommodate the growing number of arrivals. The population fluctuated from week to week, with more arriving than departing. Most tried to leave the harbor early to cross the pass before winter closed the roads. From Skagway, the line of people had two main routes, White Pass and the Chilkoot Trail. White Pass allowed pack horses, but the dirt road was soft and steep, exhausting many animals. Chilkoot was shorter but steeper, covered in ice in the winter, forcing riders to carry heavy loads up each steep section. These routes required riders to transport goods in multiple passes, creating a constant movement throughout the season. In 1900, the White Pass and Yukon Railroad was completed, significantly shortening the inland route. The train ran along cliffs and over narrow bridges, connecting Skagway to the mines and rivers to the north. For many, it was the only way to leave town and continue onto Dawson City. Today, the White Pass and Yukon Railroad still operates. Instead of carrying goods, it serves primarily as a tourist trail that tens of thousands of people once traveled. 2. Fairbanks, Northern Lights. After the gold rush, the journey inland leads to Fairbanks. The city, located on the Tanana River, is Alaska's largest center. The climate is drier and less cloudy than the coast, so the night sky in this area is usually stable, making it ideal for aurora viewing from late August to early April. Outside the city, there are several observation points on higher ground where artificial light is minimized. From these locations, the aurora usually appears as a faint band of light at the edge of the sky, then changes in intensity and color according to atmospheric activity. On cloudless nights, the bands are more visible when reflected off the snow and low mountain slopes in the distance. Depending on the timing of solar wind activity, the appearance can last from a few minutes to a few hours. From Fairbanks, the road leads north along the Yukon Valley. As you leave the city, the forests thin out and the open spaces open up. Three, Dalton Highway. The Dalton Highway stretches 414 miles from Fairbanks to the Arctic Ocean coast. It was built in the 1970s to serve the construction and maintenance of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. Much of its length runs through tundra and low hills with little human settlement. The road surface is mostly compacted gravel and changes with the weather. Heavy trucks travel here every day, delivering fuel and equipment to pumping stations along the pipeline. Along the road is a maintenance corridor that runs parallel to the pipeline, running continuously from south to north. The Dalton Highway crosses the Yukon River on the only steel bridge on the entire route. North of the bridge are sections of road that are unserviced, with only signs and small stops for long-distance vehicles. As it enters the Brooks Range, the route crosses Atigun Pass, the highest point on the Alaska Highway system. The area is often subject to strong winds and fog, which can cause visibility to change hourly. After Atigun Pass, the landscape opens up into wide tundra. The ground surface is based on permafrost, forming flat stretches of land that extend northward. Some sections of the road are rutted in the summer as the ground thaws slightly, then settles in the winter. At the end of the route, the Dalton Highway meets the Arctic Ocean coast at Prudhoe Bay, where oil facilities are concentrated. The area is gated and only pre-registered vehicles are allowed. Mornings are often damp and foggy, reducing visibility to the rows of equipment in the distance. Four, Utqiagvik Barrow, the North Pole of the United States. Utqiagvik is located on the Arctic Ocean coast and is the northernmost community in the United States. There is no direct highway connection to the national transportation system. All goods, equipment, and food are brought in by air all year round or by supply ships during the ice-free months. This has a significant impact on the cost of living and the maintenance of infrastructure. The polar climate directly affects the pace of life. Strong winds are common. Winters last for many months, and there are periods when the sun does not rise continuously. People adapt their lives by using communal buildings, heating and ventilation systems designed for the area with low temperatures. Outdoor activities are often scheduled during the summer daylight hours to minimize weather risks. Residential areas are built on flat ground, with houses placed on piles to prevent melting of the permafrost beneath. Roads lead directly to schools, health centers, administrative areas, and other daily living facilities. The majority of residents are Iñupiat. In 2016, the city officially changed its name from Barrow to Utqiagvik after a community vote. The name change was intended to restore the traditional Iñupiat name and strengthen the cultural identity of the indigenous people. The Iñupiat language is still taught in schools and used in many community activities. Along the coast are research stations that monitor sea ice animal migrations and temperature changes. Anemometers monitoring posts and data recording stations are scattered throughout, monitoring changes in the coastal area through the seasons. Part 5. Rhythm of Alaska, where man and nature intermeet. From the northernmost point of the continent, where daily activities depend directly on the icy climate, the journey continues south to record another part of Alaska where urban areas are built right next to vast natural areas. 1. Anchorage. On a summer morning, the light slant across the Chugach Mountains and covers the high-rise blocks that lie close to the shore of Cook Inlet. The roads begin to get crowded, trucks leave the port, and planes land on the runways heading towards the city center. Anchorage is the largest urban area in Alaska. The city structure is developed around the seaport, the international airport, and the road system connecting both the north and south. The downtown area consists of load-bearing buildings designed to modern seismic standards, while the residential area spreads out to the lakes and the forested areas on the outskirts of the city. The city began as a makeshift campsite on Ship Creek in 1915, when railroad workers gathered to build the Alaska Railroad. The first streets formed around the train station, then spread southward with shops, post offices, and service facilities. After World War II, the airport expanded, creating air traffic connecting Alaska to Canada and the western states. People moved to Anchorage from many mining communities, coastal towns, and inland areas, making it Alaska's most populous city. The 1964 earthquake caused extensive damage, but the subsequent rebuilding helped establish new building standards. From above, it's clear how planning was adapted to the geology. Residential areas were placed on fortified ground, and industrial areas were located in more stable areas. On days with good visibility, the Chugach Mountains appear, behind the high rises, creating a natural divide between the city and the mountains. Two, Homer, charm, at the end of the road. Moving south down the Kenai Peninsula, the highway gradually drops in elevation and opens up to Kachemak Bay. The city appears on a slope facing the water, with residential areas spreading out along the curve of the hillside. From here, you can see the mountains and glaciers on the opposite side of the bay, a defining feature of Homer. Homer Spit is the city's most prominent landmark, a narrow strip of land more than 4 miles long that extends directly into the bay. This strip of land is home to harbors, fishing landings, warehouses, and waterfront cabins. Travel between areas is largely via a system of causeways and bridges that run along the main axis of the strip. The city has a year-round community of artists and craftspeople, with galleries, pottery studios, and small shops lining the hillside facing the ocean. This is one of the features that make Homer unique, along with halibut fishing and maritime services. South of the city, Kachemak Bay State Park retains its natural topography, with rocky shorelines, dense mountain forests, and high-altitude glaciers. The park has no road connections. Access is mainly by small boat from the Homer Harbor. 3. Whittier, a town in a building. At the western entrance to Prince William Sound, there is a town that appears almost entirely in a single frame as ships pass through the fjord. The most prominent structure is located at the foot of the mountain, the first thing visitors see when approaching the residential area. That town is Whittier. Most residents live in Baggage Towers, a building built in the 1950s for military purposes. The building includes apartments, administrative offices, service areas, and common areas, forming the main residential center of the town. The building is a high-rise box shape nestled against a green mountain range and steep cliffs overlooking the bay. Immediately behind the steep slopes reveal exposed rock faces at steep points, interspersed with clusters of seasonal trees. Creeks of snowmelt run off to create natural straight lines along the cliffs, especially visible in the summer. The difference in elevation between the building's roof and the mountain peak behind it creates Whittier's characteristic visual proportions, a large residential building set directly below the steep terrain with no wide gaps between the structure and the mountainside. Along the front are port service areas, warehouses, and ancillary buildings that connect directly to the main building. Whittier is connected to Alaska's transportation system by the Anton Anderson Tunnel, a single-lane tunnel that runs more than 2.5 miles through the mountain. It is the only road access serving both rail and automobile traffic operating on a cyclical schedule. Part 6. Conclusion. Alaska, the untamed soul. For more than a century, Alaska has changed ownership names and connecting routes. These changes have occurred alongside a space that has neither expanded nor contracted at the discretion of any administration. Icefields, coastlines, temperate rainforests, and tundra in the north. From the southern coast to the Arctic Ocean, every trace of humanity lies beneath ice lines, mountain ranges, and forests that do not expand at the will of anyone. When you leave Alaska, what remains is the image of man-made structures standing next to natural elements that far exceed them.